The day I got the letter, the air felt different, heavier, like the world had paused, just long enough for me to notice how cold it had become. My parents had passed away 2 weeks earlier, and grief had already carved deep shadows in me. But this was something else. Their lawyer called me in, his voice calm but uneasy, like he was holding a secret too sharp to touch. Sitting across his mahogany desk, I heard the words I never thought would be tied to my name. "You've been cut out of the will." No explanations. No reasons. Just silence thick enough to choke on. My mother's laughter echoed faintly in my mind. Sunday breakfasts, burned pancakes, the kind of love that felt unbreakable. And now this, betrayal wrapped in legal paper. But then the lawyer cleared his throat, slid a second envelope toward me and said quietly, "Your parents didn't know about this one." My hands trembled as I reached for it, my heart pounding with questions I wasn't ready to face. Would you still love the people who erased you? What if the truth they hid was meant to protect you? And what if the real inheritance wasn't money at all? Evan stared at the sealed envelope, feeling the weight of his parents' absence pressing down on him. The lawyer's words kept echoing in his head. They didn't know about this one. What could that possibly mean? He thought of his father's stern face at every argument, his mother's soft apologies that came too late, and all of the moments they never fixed. The lawyer said nothing more, just waited. Evan broke the seal, the sound echoing through the quiet room like a whisper from the past. Inside wasn't money or property, but a handwritten letter. His mother's handwriting, slanted, gentle, trembling, and at the top, 3 words that made his heart stop cold. "For when we're gone." The letter began with memories. Summer mornings on the porch, the smell of his mother's garden, his father's laugh before it turned into something distant. But soon the tone shifted. "If you're reading this," it said, "then the truth has finally reached you." His hands trembled as he read about a secret account his parents never meant to touch. Something hidden for him, not from him. It wasn't about wealth, but about something they had protected all these years, a truth tied to his real inheritance. She mentioned a name he never heard before, someone who kept him safe. Evan's pulse quickened. Who was this person? And why did it sound like his life had been rewritten without his knowing? He flipped to the next page. A key fell out, small, brass, and worn. His mother's handwriting continued beneath it. "This belongs to the place where it all began." He knew exactly what that meant. The lake house? The one they sold years ago. The one where his father used to vanish into the shed for hours. Evan's breath hitched. Why leave him out of the will but lead him there now? His mind raced through half-remembered arguments, his father shouting about keeping things quiet, his mother crying softly in the hallway. The key glinted in his palm, and suddenly, grief turned into determination. Whatever they were hiding, he needed to see it for himself. Before leaving, Evan turned back to the lawyer. "Did my parents ever tell you about this letter?" he asked. Mr. Calloway hesitated, then shook his head slowly. "Only that you'd come one day, when you were ready." His voice carried both regret and relief. Evan tucked the letter inside his jacket, feeling its paper edge against his chest. A reminder that love could twist, hide, and still protect. As he walked out into the fading daylight, the world outside felt different, sharper. The streets hummed softly, as if whispering that something long buried was waiting to be found. The lake road hadn't changed. Every curve carried the same whispers of childhood summers, the splash of oars, his mother's laughter drifting from the dock, the scent of pine and smoke. But now, those memories felt hollow. As Evan's car rolled to a stop at the edge of the old property, the air grew heavier, colder. The house stood in silence, its paint peeling, windows veiled in dust. He held the brass key tightly, tracing the grooves with his thumb. Why had they kept this place hidden from him all these years? And what was he supposed to find here? The silence pressed against his chest as he stepped out of the car. Sometimes, grief doesn't fade. It lingers, waiting for the right door to be unlocked. He turned the key in the lock, and the door groaned open, like it had been holding its breath for years. Dust swirled in the pale light as he stepped inside. The air smelled of cedar and old books, his mother's scent still clinging faintly to the curtains. Each step echoed through the empty rooms, and memories trailed close behind. The photo wall was still there, but every picture frame had been turned backward, glass facing the wall. His pulse quickened. Someone had done this on purpose. One by one, he turned them around. His parents smiling, his younger self between them, until he reached the last frame. It held a photo he'd never seen before. His parents stood beside another child. The boy in the picture couldn't have been more than 10. Dark hair, wide smile, standing where Evan once stood. The same lake, the same dock, but Evan didn't remember him. On the back of the photo, written in his mother's looping handwriting, were 4 words that made his chest tighten. You were never alone. The room seemed to tilt. His father's old voice echoed in his mind. Arguments about the past, the sudden trips to the hospital, the whispered calls late at night. He clutched the photo tighter. Was this boy his brother? And if so, why had he been erased from every memory Evan had? He searched the house, moving through rooms swallowed by silence. Every drawer, every corner felt like it was waiting to tell him something. Then, in the small shed behind the house, he found it, a locked trunk beneath an old tarp. His heartbeat quickened as he knelt, fitting the brass key into its rusted lock. It turned with a slow, stubborn click. Inside were stacks of documents, hospital records, letters, and one small wooden toy car. His mother's handwriting marked the top page. For Evan, when he's ready. He read the name beside his own, Samuel Barrett. The word adoption appeared 3 times. His throat went dry. The brother he never knew hadn't been lost. He'd been hidden. Evan sat on the shed floor, the papers scattered around him like fallen leaves. His parents hadn't abandoned him. They'd protected him. Samuel had been born first, but something went wrong. His brother had been placed in care for reasons the letters only hinted at. Danger. Threats. Something about keeping them both safe. His parents had lived with that secret for decades, shielding one son from the truth of the other. And now, in death, they'd left it for him to uncover. Evan closed his eyes, clutching the toy car. It wasn't about money. It was about love, fear, and the kind of silence that only parents bear to protect their children. Morning light crept across the lake, washing away the shadows that had haunted the night. Evan barely slept, his mind replaying every line of his mother's letter, every document from that trunk. Samuel Barrett, a name that felt both foreign and familiar. He sat by the dock, the toy car in his hand, feeling the rough edges worn smooth by time. Somewhere out there, his brother was alive, or had been. The adoption papers ended abruptly 15 years ago. No forwarding address, no closure. But one page stood out. A contact number for a children's home, 2 towns over. He stared at it, heart pounding. For the first time in days, he felt something cutting through the fog of grief. Purpose. The drive to the children's home felt endless. The road wound through silent fields, memories blending with questions that refused to rest. When Evan arrived, the building looked tired. Pale bricks, chipped paint, a playground long abandoned. Inside, a kind-faced woman named Ms. Renner led him to a small office. When he said Samuel's name, her expression changed. "He was here," she whispered. "Sweet boy. Always asking about his family." Her voice trembled as she pulled out an old file. "He left years ago. Said he was going to find them." Evan's throat tightened. "Did he ever?" She shook her head softly. He never came back. Evan turned the pages of Samuel's file with shaking hands. School reports, medical records, a photo. Samuel, maybe 16th, smiling faintly at the camera. He looked just like their father. There was a note attached, written in a young hand. If I find them, I'll tell them I understand. Evan's breath caught. He hadn't even known his brother existed, and yet Samuel had spent his life searching for him. The realization hit like a wave. While Evan had been loved and sheltered, Samuel had been left to wonder why he wasn't enough to stay. And maybe, deep down, that guilt was what their parents carried all along. Before leaving, Ms. Renner gave him one last thing. A sealed envelope that Samuel had left behind. He said it was for his brother, if he ever came. She murmured. Evan froze. The same, neat handwriting on the front. To Evan. His chest tightened as he opened it. Inside was a single note and a faded address. I found them, but it was too late. I hope you'll forgive them, and me. The address led to the next town over. Evan folded the letter carefully, whispering the name under his breath as if afraid it might vanish. Samuel had found their parents. But when? And what did he mean by too late? As rain began to fall, Evan sat in his car staring at the address on the note. It wasn't just another lead. It was a doorway into his parents' hidden years, the missing piece of their silence. The windshield blurred with raindrops as he whispered his brother's name again. Samuel. A ghost he never met but somehow already missed. The truth wasn't far now, and for the first time Evan felt ready to face it, no matter what it cost him. He turned the ignition, headlights cutting through the mist, and drove toward the storm. The address led Evan to the edge of town, a narrow lane lined with oak trees and silence. The rain had stopped, but the sky hung heavy, gray, and still. The house before him was small, quiet, with ivy crawling up the walls and a single light flickering inside. He hesitated at the gate, clutching Samuel's letter in his pocket. This was it. The place where every hidden truth pointed. He pushed the gate open, the rusty hinge screeching into the quiet. For the first time, he wasn't afraid of what he might find. He just needed to know. Because sometimes, not knowing hurts more than the truth itself. A woman answered the door. Mid-40s, gentle eyes, confusion written across her face. "Can I help you?" she asked softly. Evan's voice nearly broke as he said his brother's name. Her eyes widened. "You knew Samuel?" she whispered. The air thickened between them. She led him inside into a small room filled with photos. Samuel smiling, Samuel painting, Samuel standing by a hospital bed. The woman introduced herself as Mara, Samuel's wife. Evan's knees nearly buckled. His brother hadn't just lived, he'd loved. He'd built a life. One Evan never knew existed, but the next words stole his breath. "He passed away last year," she said quietly. "He always hoped you'd come." Evan sat on the couch, eyes tracing Samuel's face in each photograph. A man who looked so much like him, it hurt. Mara handed him a box filled with letters. "He wrote to them," she said softly, "every year, but he never sent them." Evan unfolded the top letter. Samuel's handwriting was shaky but full of love. "I forgive you. I understand why you did it." His throat tightened as tears blurred the words. Samuel hadn't been abandoned. He had known the truth, and chosen forgiveness long before Evan even knew his name. Grief swelled, but beneath it something warmer flickered. Connection, even across time and silence. Mara handed Evan one last envelope, sealed, with his name written in Samuel's bold handwriting. His heart pounded as he opened it. Inside, a single page. "If you're reading this, I hope you know. They never stopped loving us. They just couldn't face what happened." At the bottom was an address. The lake house. Evan looked up at Mara, confused. She nodded softly. He wanted you to go back. There's something there only you can find. The words felt like an echo through generations. Unfinished love, unspoken truth, and one final message waiting to be heard. That night, Evan drove back through the rain, Samuel's letter on the passenger seat. The lake came into view again, dark and endless beneath the storm clouds. His parents' secret had been heavy, but not cruel. Born of fear, not betrayal, they had hidden one son to protect the other, and in doing so, broke both their hearts. But Samuel's words changed everything. Forgiveness wasn't about erasing the past. It was about understanding it. As thunder rolled above the lake, Evan whispered a promise to the brother he'd never met. "I'll finish what you started." The road curved homeward, and for the first time, it didn't feel empty. The storm had passed by the time Evan reached the lake house again. The air felt washed clean, the sky painted in dull silver streaks of dawn. He stepped out of the car, clutching Samuel's letter against his chest. Every step toward the porch felt heavier, as though the earth itself remembered everything that had been hidden here. He unlocked the door and stepped inside. The silence was no longer haunting, but expectant. Somewhere in these walls, his brother had left him something their parents couldn't. The sound of floorboards creaked beneath his boots, guiding him toward the small study at the back of the house. The room his father had always kept locked. The study was just as he remembered. The smell of tobacco, stacks of papers, his father's worn leather chair facing the window. Evan's eyes drifted to a small box on the desk, sealed with red wax identical to the envelope from the lawyer's office. His pulse quickened as he broke the seal. Inside was a folded letter, his father's handwriting rough but deliberate. "To our sons." Evan read in silence, the words trembling in his hands. His father confessed what their parents never had. Samuel had been targeted because of a debt gone wrong, something Jonathan had gotten involved in before Evan was born. They'd sent Samuel away to protect him. When the danger passed, guilt kept them apart. "Morby, when your son work shore." He read until the ink blurred. His father's words weren't perfect. They were desperate, aching, written by a man who had spent a lifetime haunted by one decision. "We never stopped loving either of you," it said. "We only hoped time would forgive what we couldn't face." Evan sank to the floor, the letter falling into his lap. All the anger head carried began to dissolve, replaced by something softer. Sorrow, yes, but also understanding. His parents hadn't failed him. They had failed themselves, trying to protect two sons from a world that demanded silence. Forgiveness didn't come easy, but it came all the same. As the sun rose higher, Evan noticed a final envelope tucked beneath the desk drawer. This one marked in his mother's handwriting. He opened it carefully. Inside was a single photograph, Samuel as a boy, standing beside the lake smiling. On the back were 5 simple words: "Bring him home to us." His parents' will had never been about wealth. It had been about redemption. The true inheritance was peace, the chance to finally bring their family's truth into the light. Evan walked outside to the dock, the photograph in one hand, his father's letter in the other. The lake was calm again, its reflection mirroring the clouds above. He set both letters on the water's edge, letting the breeze lift them gently away. As the papers drifted out over the lake, he whispered a quiet thank you to his parents, to Samuel, to the years that shaped them all. Some truths come too late to fix, but not too late to heal. Evan stood there until the sun fully rose, painting the world in gold, feeling for the first time that his family, fractured, flawed, but full of love, had finally come home. The drive back to the city felt lighter, like the weight of years had finally lifted off his shoulders. Evan rolled the window down and let the cool wind rush through, carrying the scent of pine and rain. In the passenger seat, the photograph of Samuel rested safely inside his wallet. No longer a stranger, but a brother he carried with him. Now, the world looked different. The streets, the fields, even the sky felt softer, almost forgiving. He realized that closure didn't mean forgetting. It meant accepting that some stories end in silence, and some in understanding. For the first time in a long time, Evan felt ready to live again. Not in the shadow of what was lost, but in the light of what was found. Back in the city, Evan parked outside the old family home, the one he hadn't visited since the funeral. The house looked smaller now, quieter, almost gentle in its stillness. He unlocked the front door and stepped inside, greeted by faint echoes of laughter, the scent of his mother's favorite candles, and memories tucked into every corner. He placed Samuel's photo on the mantel beside his parents' framed portrait. For the first time, all three faces were together, the family finally whole, even in memory. Evan stood there in silence, a single tear slipping down his cheek, not from sorrow, but peace. He spent the afternoon cleaning, opening windows that hadn't been touched in years, letting sunlight pour into every dusty corner. The air felt alive again. As he worked, Evan found old boxes tucked beneath the stairs. Photos, home videos, birthday cards, fragments of a life frozen in time. He smiled through tears as he replayed a clip of his parents dancing clumsily in the kitchen, laughing like they had all the time in the world. Maybe they'd made mistakes, but love had never left this house. It had only gone quiet for a while. Now it spoke again, through every echo, every memory, every heartbeat that refused to fade. As evening fell, Evan sat by the window with a cup of coffee, watching the sky turn shades of amber and rose. The world outside hummed quietly. Cars passing, people laughing faintly in the distance. Life moved on, and he was finally moving with it. He thought of Samuel often now, not as a shadow, but as a story that completed his own. His parents' choices no longer felt like betrayals. They were human, flawed, frightened, but full of love they didn't know how to show. And somehow that was enough. Forgiveness had found him, gently, like sunlight sneaking through an open window. Later that night, Evan lit a single candle and placed it on the windowsill. Outside, the city lights shimmered like stars fallen to earth. He whispered the names of his parents, then Samuel's, not in mourning but in gratitude. The flame flickered gently, its reflection glowing in the glass like a promise. Love, he realized, doesn't end when people do. It lingers in the letters, the memories, the forgiveness we learn to give ourselves. Evan smiled softly and whispered, "We are home now." And for the first time it was true. Weeks passed, and life began to take a new shape. The grief no longer consumed Evan. It moved beside him, quieter now, almost guiding him. He spent his mornings walking by the lake, the same path his parents once took, the same one Samuel had stood upon years before. Each ripple on the water felt like a whisper from the past, a reminder that every story, no matter how broken, still carries light. He had decided to do something with all that he'd found, the letters, the photos, the truth. They weren't meant to be buried again. They were meant to be remembered. Evan reached out to Mara a few days later. They met at a small cafe near the train station, where she worked now, her eyes carrying both sadness and warmth. When he told her he wanted to tell Samuel's story, all of it, she smiled through tears. "He'd like that," she said softly. Together they decided to create something lasting, a foundation in Samuel's, named to support children who had grown up without families of their own. As they talked, the pain between them softened into something else. Shared purpose, healing, and a quiet kind of hope that felt like family. Months later, the first event for the foundation took place at the local community center. Families filled the room, children laughing, volunteers setting up photos of Samuel's life, his artwork, his letters. Evan stood at the podium, heart pounding, his voice trembling at first, but growing steady as he spoke. "This isn't about loss," he said. "It's about finding each other again, even after life tries to pull us apart." As he looked across the crowd, he saw his parents' faces in his mind, smiling, proud. For the first time, he wasn't just their son. He was their legacy, And Samuel's too. After the event, Evan stepped outside into the cool evening air. The stars shimmered above, scattered and endless. He felt the quiet peace of knowing his story had come full circle. From betrayal to truth, from grief to gratitude. He thought of his father's trembling handwriting, his mother's gentle words, Samuel's letter of forgiveness. They had each given him a piece of something bigger, courage, compassion, and the strength to begin again. The night breeze carried the scent of pine and rain, and for a moment, Evan closed his eyes, hearing the faint echo of Samuel's laugh somewhere in the wind. Weeks later, Evan returned to the lake one last time. He stood at the dock, the same place where everything had begun and ended. The water was still, the air warm, the sky painted in soft gold. He took Samuel's photo from his wallet and placed it on the wooden railing beside his parents' old picture. "We're together now," he whispered. A small smile crossed his face as he watched the sun sink behind the trees. Life, he realized, doesn't give us perfect endings. It gives us meaning, the kind that grows in the quiet spaces after the storm. And as he turned to leave, the lake shimmered behind him, peaceful and whole, just like his heart.